we had as a promissory note from the president when he took over. But now, looking at the president or looking at the police, I presume this should be the IG who is stepping actually on the coffin there of the demonstrators as the soapbox, so to speak, and holding his gun as well. This is some of the scenes that we saw yesterday, where it is recorded right now that we have 13 lives that have been lost in the protests, and also we're given to understand, and we have confirmed, or confirmation of this report as well, more deaths, especially in some of the states in the country as well, picking up Githurai as well. Professor Kagwanyi, we just want to just continue on this particular information, then we gravitate to other issues just briefly. But
yes,
on the issue of the advisors as well, because that raised that question, and I think will be also right up on your alley, you as a think tank, because you think there's a devoid of people who have maybe the, I don't know if I will call it the intellectual provenance or good advice, or then how do you get a good advice at the end of the day? And I hear from this particular table, I say I've not heard from Dr. Kanenje, that the calling of the KDF deployment is unbecoming. It is not really called for. No. That should be the last resort. We've not really exhausted our other options, as it were. This is what we're coming from this particular table. So the president should rethink this particular act?
I think first and foremost, the president needs to rethink his advisors. I am the last person who should make this comment. But I'm also an intellectual in my own right, and therefore, and I live in this country and have my children and grandchildren in this country. Therefore, I have no qualms basically making this comment. The vast majority of President Ruto's advisors are former World Bank consultants, IMF consultants. They are also, very, very close to the State Department in the United States and so on. So they are literally the hang-ons of what you'd call the international, or the liberal international order. And therefore, they are no, in this particular debate, they will be the worst advisors. And as the more they hang around there, the more they hang President Ruto. Sorry for him. The second thing I want to make is just a quick reminder, and going back to the story by Professor Munene about history and leadership. If you're devoid of history, including what happened yesterday, then you cannot make decisions about tomorrow. President Mwai Kibaki was in his office around January, early January, January 2nd, January 3rd. Kofi Annan jetted into the country, took a chopper, went round, the parts of Kenya that were on fire during the post-election violence. He came back with his normal humanitarian feelings and was raving and telling President Kibaki, something needs to be done. You need to deploy the military. You need to deploy the military. These people are killing each other. And President Kibaki looked at him in the eye and asked, who is the enemy in this case? Who are we sending the military to kill? This is President Mwai Kibaki telling Kofi Annan, who is the enemy? Who is the military going to kill? These are Kenyans fighting against Kenyans. We have to talk and find a solution to that. Then Kofi went on to say, oh no, we can bring neutral international peacekeepers to separate. Then ask, who are we separating? Who are we separating? These are Kikuyus who married Karenjins, Karenjins who have married Ruyas, Ruyas who have married Kikuyus, and Ruos who have married, who are we separating? So it is that wisdom that prevailed and took us to Serena. And that is how we kept the military out of this affair. Now, without those kind of lessons, how far can we go? In short, if this idea of bringing out the military is itself suicidal in national terms, Hanenje told us, take the millennials, the late millennials, take the Gen Zs, and add the alphas, the younger generations now. what do you get? 80% of our population. 80% of our population. And our future. Set the military to kill our future. And we see what kind of wisdom we have. So tomorrow, I think we have something very close to Armageddon, and only reason will prevail. Because we have two armies. The armies of our children, armed the moral issue that we have we have killed their past, we are busy killing we have killed their present, and we are busy killing their future. That's a moral army. We now have the military, which will be deployed to hold them back from whatever action they are planning. Where is Kenya?
Right. There's a good question also that is being raised here, looking at the Article 241 of the Constitution, B, where it says, which has been cited, of course, by the CS or Defense in the Gazette notice, allowing KDF to be deployed to assist other authorities in case of emergency or national disaster. And this was also what was orienting my thinking, and I wanted to ask this question as well, because there's no state of a national disaster or emergency has been declared until then. No state of emergency has been declared, and there is no national disaster. And what is contemplated by the Constitution as a national disaster are such matters like landslides, volcanic eruption, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, tsunamis, cyclones, wildfires, and pandemics. Ideally, a national disaster requires to be officially declared. The CS only calls it a security emergency. The CS has avoided the more applicable 241 3 subsection C, which allows KDF to be deployed in areas where there is unrest or instability. The mischief the CS has avoided is the mandatory parliamentary approval required before deployment under 241 subsection 3 C. And they say the only thing required of Parliament under Section 31 of the Kenya Defence Forces Act is to be informed of such deployment, but there is no provision for it to do or not to do anything about it. I wanted just to make it a bit limited because we've seen and we've had this discussion before where we see there is a state of emergency, there's a deployment of KDF, then the Parliament will approve much later afterwards. Because I think that debate we've had it here before, isn't it?
Yes. And it is. I think we are just falling short of saying that what was pronounced last night is criminally illegal. It is illegal in the sense that there is no condition in this country which equates to an emergency or which equates to the things you've mentioned, disaster and so on. After 6 o'clock, these kids were in their father's homes, in their mother's homes. They went back, and they're making a point. Now, what the problem is that the government has refused to implement the Constitution the way it is supposed to be implemented. The mass demonstrations are telling the government that there was no public participation, and if you don't know that there was no public participation, then count us. So what it means that even if there is no conflict or anything, after this bill is assigned by the president, it will go to the courts, and it will be nullified. Why will it be nullified? Because the numbers in the street and the passing of the bill tell you that there was no public participation or there was disregard of public participation. There is no other evidence you need in the law court to prove that there was no public participation. And people are dying seeking to participate or to the recognition of public participation. So I think the future lies here. One, the government should immediately suspend the bill, and I think this was made by Professor Macharia Munene. Two, you invoke the continuation bill, which enable us to continue running as a country as we sort our affairs.
That is the Finance Act.
The Finance Act. And finally, you get the country talking.
No, but finally you said you recall back the deployment of the KDF.
No, we are saying the KDF is not yet out yet. The KDF is not yet out because when I was coming, I was very, very, very careful that I don't drive into, roadblocks mounted by the military the way we did in 1982. So we don't have that. So I think what do you
mean we don't have that?
No, we have not seen the military in our civilian space. I drove from my house to
this. But they can't just show up until now there's a protest.
No, that's why I'm saying that up to now, it is in theory. It is not in practice. Now, because if it is in practice, we would have said that today I found the military, so I will not really call the military back because it's already not out. What we can say is recall that statement.
That statement, okay.
That says that we are going to bring the military, knowing very well that the military is not trained to negotiate, it is trained to kill. And what we've been avoiding in these mass demonstrations is the killing of innocent civilians who have declared their ideology as peace and are going to these protests with only one item, water to drink, as they do their patriotic duty of saying they don't want the bill. Even if the bill is good or it is bad, because it's a conversation, as President Ruto calls it, it's a conversation, but it's not a conversation that should be one-sided, that the government should have the bill and the people cannot say the same. So in short, what we are saying here is that we need to come back to reason as government.
All right. Let's hear from Professor Macharia, and of course also we shall hear from the clergies as well, who gave their statement yesterday regarding just the protest, and then we move on to the deployment of the security officers in Haiti.
Yeah, it's all is not lost, huh? Despite the grim picture that is coming up. People should not lose hope and all that. And I agree with Peter. The military are not out. They were told you prepare to be out, not out, and they should stay there for now because they are not needed in this space. Now, 400 of police officers were sent to Haiti.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
So, anyway, just to maybe adding on to what Peter was saying, there is no need, as I said earlier. Invoking that provision is premature, and maybe it's their advisors who advised him or failed to advise him, who needs rethinking to be found, to find out why they did that. But there really is no need for that. And then the demonstrators are very interesting people. They are not only peaceful, they even give the police water to drink. So, they're very interesting that they're going to find the police, you need some water because you are exhausted. These are not enemies. And so the approach to dealing with them also needs to be better than they are there. They are right now better than the government.
Right. I wanted just to also raise the issue of the security of our legislators as well.
Yeah.
Because we've had cases, their houses have been, of course, lit up and vandalized.
Yes. No, that is a serious
story
concern.
of Nyeri, the looting of the store there, right? The supermarket that is owned, that I understand is owned by one of...
I understand.
The MPs there.
Why some people are saying maybe we need the military. From the little messages I've received, that the MPs, when they were locked up in Parliament, and they really were scared.
For their lives?
Yes, they were. And so it is the military that helped them to get out, because the police had been overwhelmed. Fair enough, that's good enough. I mean, there is nothing wrong with that. So you can see there's some of the thinking that might say, yeah, we need the military on the street. Say, no. You don't need that. Yes, there have been some of those bad outcomes, and peculiarly they appear to target some people who may not have had very good words to say before. People who talk about reducing obesity by increasing taxes, people who talk about the youth as Kentucky Fried Chicken eaters. And they seem to be targeted visiting. Not that it is encouraged, but it's also a message to be examined exactly what's going on. The violence that occurred is to be condemned, whichever way, is to be condemned. Then we go beyond that violence. Exactly why? Okay? And if these are isolated incidents, why? It's not mass violence. These are isolated. And people want to know, could you tell us what's going on? And some of it appeared to be connected to belief. The very thing that was about the belief of corruption. How do you deal with corruption in Parliament? The MPs generally per month take something close to 2 million shillings, okay, if not more, through the official salary and the benefits and how many people get petrol allowance of 300 or 400,000 shillings a month? Things of the sort. So the perception that they live large when the rest of the country is suffering. Therefore, they don't feel the pain. And if they don't feel the pain, then therefore they're insensitive to what people are going through. And if they're insensitive to what people are going through, the anger seems to accumulate. So when some of them speak badly about what people are going through, it might explain why some of the reactions, the targeting. Because when you say this, each of them has been targeted. It's not random. Now, if it was random violence, you say, wait a minute. But this target, so we want to know why they are targeting those particular people and not everybody. So, the calling of the military was premature. It's good that they have not shown up in the streets yet, and we hope they never do, or they do not. And the president will be able to reconsider his decision and tell them to just stay in the barracks and do whatever they do in the barracks and wait for a proper enemy, because these young people are not the enemy. They are not.
All right, they're not the enemy. We want to just turn the crack a bit now to where, of course, we have also security officers being deployed, where President William Ruto, or Ruto's bid, actually bid a ceremonial goodbye on Monday to some 400 police officers set to lead a UN-backed mission to tackle gang violence in Haiti. The president said this over the weekend, that a contingent will depart on Tuesday. A senior police official said the group will comprise elite officers from the Rapid Deployment Unit, General Service Unit, Administration Police, and Kenya Police. The deployment was approved by a UN Security Council resolution in October, only to be delayed by a Kenyan court decision in January. The court said Ruto's administration had no authority to send officers abroad without a prior bilateral agreement, while the government secured that agreement with Haiti in March. Third Way Alliance Kenya filed a fresh lawsuit in another attempt to block it. So they've landed. Let's just hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenje. In light of this is where we can say again that the center has not been speaking to the periphery, because our periphery, I think everyone in the panel has given their voice over the deployment of the police officers in Haiti.
Yes, the first batch of our Kenyan police officers have arrived in Port-au-Prince. To a mixed reaction, by Haitians. Now, I don't know whether this is going to be a case of the senator speaking to the periphery, because that type of decision is not exactly subject to, an average Kenyan's participation. It's a foreign affairs decision, that is within the confines of the presidency as well as parliament, depending on the contents of that type of deployment. Of course, however, there's been a debate and also noise coming from certain Kenyans who felt a little bit dissatisfied that there is still ongoing insecurity in the country at the time when we're deploying, in a foreign land. Yet, this still is very much within the confines of Kenya's foreign policy. It's not the first time we're deploying, it probably won't be the last. It's one of the things that Kenya has actually been very proud of doing, and Kenya has been committed, to doing that. So we can argue with regard to the merits of the deployment and the timing of it, but it still falls within, Kenya's, traditional practice that has also helped in building our prestige as well as profile with the international community. I think one thing that
be that may as it may, the question will be again. People have been asking, where is it according to the Constitution? Should we be deploying the military or the police officers as well? Just reading from the constitutions and where the confines and the boundaries are set as well. This has been a debate from before. That even if we had a storied history of sending peacekeepers or police officers, at the end of the day, has that been also an abrogation of a constitution before?
The legalese of it, beyond what we understand as the functions of the presidency and parliament with regard to foreign affairs, then that is going to be, beyond my or above my pay grade, because outside what we understand, the nuances of, because we know the civil society went to court, trying to prevent that type of deployment. But from where we stand, the presidency and parliament are the institutions that are actually tasked with such a mission. Now, there are genuine questions to be asked by Kenyans. Now, from where we stand, is not just about the legality of it, but perhaps the timing or the appropriateness, or the likelihood of success on the ground, considering the complex situation in Haiti. And that is something that can be discussed, because Kenya will be leading a multinational support, force. It's not just going to be the only country. And so the questions with regard to the situation in Haiti and whether or not we're going to be successful, and whether the commitments have been made by our partners, because while it's a UN-sanctioned mission, it's not a UN-funded mission. And so I think the discussions, if we were to move in that direction, because the deployment is a fait accompli, it's happening. Perhaps it's going to be a lot more productive with regard to discussing some of those nuances and how best can we ensure we're going to succeed, because if we fail, it's not going to be very good. But if we succeed, of course, we're going to take full credit. And so I think the question should be focusing also on that. But now, in the light, of course, of what is happening here, for instance, in the country, that also may raise the question from some of our partners with regard to our performance, especially, when it comes to our security, forces and the police. And that may cause certain diplomatic challenges for us, as well as cause the reputational damage, to the country. And so even how we deal with our own crowds and protesters here is going to be important, so that those who may wish Kenya harm internationally do not exploit some of what may be happening here to try and actually paint that negative image of our men and women who are sacrificing to go to Haiti to try and bring peace to the people of Haiti who've suffered for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Peter Kagwanji had raised the issue of, the specter that we have here in the country, that we cannot really contain our own protests. And then we have now Haiti getting our police officers. I think you'd begin with that. I think you're saying this you're talking family in cheek, or you really meant it, that if they're not really rising above the parakeet right now, how then will they rise in Haiti as it is? Because now we have the military deployment, and now we're sending the police officers, and we're saying these gangs are more even brutal, they're armed than people who are protesting peacefully, aside from just the spate of violence that we saw in Parliament and other areas as well with the City Hall.
Let me start by invoking an African saying, or a piece of African wisdom, which says, a man whose house is on fire does not go around chasing rats, escaping the flames. A man whose house is on fire does not go around chasing rats, escaping the flames. And that is exactly what we are doing in Haiti. Our house is on fire. Before we even gazette notices of our military getting out, we should be putting our police force together, because our police force is the last frontier of our engagement with the civilians. And because the police force are trained to negotiate with civilians, to look at the laws. They know the law, they are trained, basic law, in dealing with the civilians. Therefore, they have that dual mandate of enforcing the law and at the same time finding an environment in which the law can be implemented without necessary conflict. In Haiti, there's the inverse. The Kenyan police force does not speak French, to the best of my knowledge. It's not one of the things we train in Kiganjo, French. Haiti is 100% a French-speaking nation. So unless we are giving advisory services, if it's the police force, then it's a waste of time. KDF would have done a better job. Possibly the GSU would have done a better job. Maybe we need to see how to go about that. But again, the Haitians are concerned about the military interfering with their civilian affairs. That is why this UN force is conceived as a police force. It's a camouflage of the reality that you cannot deploy the military in a civilian environment. Therefore, the UN can only authorize a police force. Yet the situation there required from our law the deployment of KDF. So we are caught up in that, and of course this shows the negative influence of our kowtowing to the interest of superpowers. We should not kowtow to China. We should not kowtow to America. We should be ourselves. We have national interest as a country. And therefore, I know we have made a career as a country in peacekeeping. And we're going to continue doing that as peacekeepers. And our police force can always be deployed behind our military in situations where we need negotiations with the environment in which we are intervening. But this idea of sending our police force with a need to foreign countries is in contravention of our basic, doctrine of how we do things. External matters are for the military, internal matters are for the police force. There's a clear division of labor. When Max Weber and other philosophers thought about these things, it is not that they were wasting their time. They were trying to demarcate spaces. And these spaces have moral imperatives. And that is where we are now caught up, because our government has refused to think.
Right, but our government thinks that also that intervention in South Sudan, actually in Sudan, with the situation in Sudan, should not actually be taking an option of the military intervention. If you've seen the statements before from the president as well, which flies in the face of what is happening here. So are we advising other jurisdictions within the East African community, so to speak, and then it's a different kettle of fish for us here in the country when we talk about diplomacy?
It's a sign of confusion.
It's a sign of confusion.
At their thinking level. Because you tell people, they don't do that, and then you go ahead and do the opposite. So,
yeah, because you've been telling Sudan to restrain.
They should restrain, and it's a matter of talking. It's not a military solution. And all those, that we've been very vocal, and it's a good statement that find a way of settling by discussing, especially the two military figures, Burhan and Dagalo, because they both are very strong in their own small ways. And then we say, don't go military, talk. And then here we, at home, we turn around and say, no, our police are inefficient, cannot do what needs to. So we need the military to to come in and do this or that is an awkward thing. Though, understand maybe one or two military might be guarding some strategic offices already. That's what I understand. I may be wrong, but there is that. So the contradiction itself is so evident that it looks as if somebody needs advice on how to go about things. Now, our people landed in Haiti, and there is a joke, I don't know if a joke or a serious statement, that the Haitians are going to send police to Kenya to keep the peace. Having seen what's happening,
Swapping now.
They're going to swap and then those kind of things, because the things are not they are not good. They are not looking good. So we have a crisis of confidence, in the sense that the country looks like a joke, and when the 400 arrived in Haiti, Port-au-Prince, among the first people to commend it was Joe Biden. Say, well, people are doing very good now. The Haitians have a hope. They'll say, okay, fair enough. But do the Haitians see it that way? The Haitians, they don't see it that way. They see it a little differently. And that's why they joke that they are going to send some police officers here to come and keep the peace, because there's a contradiction. And how to get out of that rat, because it's a rat, is a different matter. And it's not very easy without paying more attention to the dynamics of the whole the whole struggle, because it's a struggle that needs to be thought out clearly. But it's not all lost. Our people are there, so we wish them the best and hope that they don't come back in body bags, But they do the best they can. But for them to do the best they can, we need to get our house in order right here, not out there, so that the fire we see, the flames, put down with better fire engines. But we may not have good fire engines. That's the problem.
Indeed. All right, we want us to move to what will be happening also in South Sudan right now, where with South Sudan having failed to meet the September 2020 deadline for a permanent constitution, all indications are that the demand by the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, that is SSOMA, that is SOMA, for one before elections cannot be achieved in 6 months. This means the country could go to an election without clear constitutional provisions to guide the process. But close associates of President Salva Kiir maintain that the government can rely on South Sudan Transitional Constitution 2011. Yet the 2018 revitalized peace agreement in Chapter 6 prescribes a constitution to guide the electoral and election processes. The 2011 Transitional Constitution provides guideline in Chapter 14 on who can contest an election, while much of the chapter focuses on the formation and the functions of the National Elections Commission, NEC. Unlike other constitutions in the region that are complemented by election laws, it has no mention of political parties and their conduct during elections, and no provision for electoral dispute mechanism. Some observers are concerned that should the country go to elections without a constitution, the outcome can easily be rejected on a legal basis. And in the absence of an election dispute mechanism, the country could plunge into fresh violence. Dr. Kanyenje, if we may just begin with you on that latest development as well. We know the days are ticking. These elections, they've been a moving target, right? And still, they're not really putting their house in order.
And they're going to remain moving targets. It is virtually impossible within the current environment to be able to proceed with the elections as planned. And the talks that have been going on the better part of this month here to Lesereni in Kenya, was trying to revitalize the agreement that can build some framework to ensure there's going to be stability in South Sudan and allow eventually for a number of things to be undertaken. Now, this also taking place at a time when the economy is in pretty bad shape. Inflation free fall, the currency is in tatters, And frankly speaking, it is not prepared to be able to undertake the kind of changes that are going to be required to allow for political transition that is fair, stable, and just, and that is not going to cause the kind of chaos that we see. Now, Kenya has re-engaged, and this is something you have to give it out to the administration in Nairobi, has re-engaged in ways that, I think had been out of that space for a while, because not many countries can be able to do that. And there is a lot of goodwill from Sudan when it comes to Kenya's engagement, and especially central role it is playing in that. General Simbueo is back into the game again, and we just hope that Nairobi is going to help South Sudan now agree on something they can actually be able to implement. But also critically, try to bring the international community to be able to fund some of those processes. Now, it's unfortunate that we have to rely on others to be able to do that, but at the same time, we just have not built sufficient resources as a region or a country, which we've been talking about a peace fund for the region to be able to do that. And neither is South Sudan, or has it put in place mechanisms to actually ensure that that process is undertaken. And so Nairobi should stay engaged, but the things that were planned, it's been years of frozen process. Things that were planned were not undertaken, and therefore the current talks that are geared towards moving on the next stage, I think, are going to be helpful. But yes, elections and the new constitution by the state timelines are unachievable right now. They're a pipe dream. However, the current talks, I think, point to efforts to forestall potential conflict that may arise out of the chaos of uncertainty.
All right, so you think this is by design in any way? That we should have, the system in place, the continuity thereafter?
Generally, in politics, the status quo will always want to be able to maintain the power. And to the extent that there was no robust external intervention to ensure they move towards the stated goals, of course, it had to be dragged out, and then it benefits, of course, those, the status quo, both in the opposition as well as in government. And so I think going forward, we have to ensure as a region and as a country that we actually push the parties to implement whatever agreements are going to emanate from the ongoing talks.
Professor Munene.
I agree with Dr. Kanenje that we need to push a little bit more. Do we have the capacity to push? That's the main thing, yeah? When we are breaking down, our ability to make others do things is also reduced accordingly, and even the trust. South Sudan has been a continuing tragedy right from day one. And in part, as General Simbueo once remarked, when they were negotiating the first time, they did not think of the consequences of the success, because they were successful in eventually creating a new country. But what after that? They did not think about the aftermath of that. And we are living with that now. So they've been trying to unravel the mess that followed in order to create a new reality and to convince the Southern Sudanese that they don't need a new reality. Convincing them is a problem. In part because the South Sudanese never did one important thing. They never had a dialogue upon independence about the country that they wanted. All of them. What you had were the leaders, SPLMA and others. A few of them, they shared positions, but there was no dialogue in the country about the future. And so some of those who have been separating were those who they were left out. That it was really, this was a deal between the Nuer and the Dinka, and not everybody else. So bringing everybody together is a very serious and hard task. And maybe that's why even with General Simbueo, he's dealing with these bigger problems than just the leaders of these things. It may take a little time, but I'm sure he's doing his best. But convincing some of those people who are very suspicious of each other and suspicious of Kenya anyway, because that's also a factor, will make it difficult. Will they have an election in September? In my view, if they do have the organs to conduct the elections, if they do, then they should go ahead anyway. Okay? They should go ahead anyway. It would not be perfect. It will have some weaknesses, but they need to create that motion of doing things, and then we can deal with the panel beating later. So they should go ahead.
All right, go full steam ahead. All right, I think we have a few minutes just remaining right now, and I'll just give this chance also to just give you closing remarks as well. Let's begin with you, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, your closing remarks.
Yesterday will go down in the annals of Kenyan history as the day of infamy, and the day that we had forgotten how to talk to each other, and the day that perhaps our politics was not speaking to the economics of our people, but also a day of reckoning that we need to be able to have an introspection as a country, that we need to dialogue among ourselves. We are facing unprecedented times. The social, economic, and political fabric of the country is at stake. We desecrated our national institutions in a way it has not been done before. What is it that is pushing a lot of young people to the extent where they can dishonor what is most honorable in the country? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. We need not to be moving in an escalatory path. We need to move towards de-escalation. And to do that, all hands need to be the deck. And we must be willing to make certain mutual concessions for us to actually move forward. There need to be a middle ground, because brinkmanship is only going to push us to the brink of state collapse.
Indeed. All right, let's hear from you also, Professor Mashal Munene, your closing remarks.
Dr. Kanenje is my friend, and occasionally we disagree. He says it's a time of infamy.
Yes.
Which he borrows from Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yes.
I don't think it's that one.
The day of infamy, yeah, also of the final solution. Yeah.
I think it's a time of hope.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things. And the country, despite the problems, is not collapsed. And it will not collapse. So there's a lot of hope that people are talking. Yeah? They are raising issues. Eh? I sympathize with the members of parliament who are harassed and had to be rescued. I really feel for them. And I feel for the institutions. But I also feel that we are in a vibrant time for the future, a good vibrancy. That even the president, when he was talking, although he did not touch on the bill, he just, I think,
Yes.
at least he came out to say, hey, I've had some, let's find a way out. So it's a time of hope. And the young people who are very active and energetic, I mean, you are doing the right thing. Only limits there. And there are those people who are trying to take advantage of it, because there is.
The criminal elements.
The criminal elements,
Yes.
you know, they are very few. And I understand that in some places there have been some killings. In Githurai, I understand there is some,
Yes.
some bad behavior, maybe by some police or some other people, that needs to be looked into. But generally, the country is safe. And the people, the Kenyans themselves, who are very resilient, are capable and will make sure that the country remains safe.
Thank you.
There is no problem. It's a time of hope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Time for winding up. I want to thank you so much for that very cogent discussion that we've had this morning. In absentia, I also want to thank Professor Peter Kagwanya, who just left because he was in a tearing rush as well, to be in a meeting by now, 9 o'clock. Farah Malim was not sure today. I don't know what happened. Of course, maybe also the event of yesterday. Most of the legislators will want to keep away, yeah, and understandably so. And so we hope to have an engagement next week. But gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. And thank you also for your valued company. You've been watching Global Today here in Morning Prime, where we were actually navel-gazing on what was happening yesterday and moving forward. And it's been also the voice of the panelists that the president should reconsider also